So we were talking about how after the Buddha's enlightenment, he wondered whether he should teach or not, and then decided that he should after Brahma and Indra and so on requested him. And then how he taught his 5 previous companions, and thus the Sangha community was begun. Okay, so what happened was, there's something called the fourfold Sangha, okay, which means male and female lay practitioners, the upasakas and upasikas, people who have taken refuge in 5 precepts, and the male and female fully ordained ones, the bhikshus and the bhikshunis. And so the Buddha very much had in mind to create this fourfold Sangha, with everybody included practicing in a way that was best for, according to each individual. Yeah, so each person could choose whether they wanted to be a lay practitioner or a monastic practitioner. In terms of the, and the Buddha gave ethical guidance for both. In terms of the lay practitioners, there was the 5 precepts that they took when they took refuge in the Buddha. And for the monastics, then you had different levels of precepts arising. At first, there was just the full ordination, The Buddha said, "Come, O bhikkhu," and you were ordained, and that was it. That was the ordination ceremony. But then later on, when children started ordaining, they, sometimes the parents were objecting, and then also sometimes the children were crying because they were hungry at night, or, they couldn't walk so long, or, it was hard for the children to keep the full discipline. So then the Buddha made the ordination of Shramana or Shramanarika, in Tibetan Getsul or Getsulma. And that was for children. You could ordain as long as you could scare, from the age at which you could scare away a crow. So approximately 8 years old. And then when you were 20 years old, and 20 is, you count starting your age from the time of conception, not from the time of birth. Then when you were 20, you could become fully ordained. And then they later instituted an ordination for women in between those two, which was like a 2-year special training probationary period. And then for the lay people, they had, the 5 lay precepts, and then the 1-day precepts that people could take and these were the 8 precepts that you take for 1 day. Those are similar to the 8 Mahayana precepts we took today, only one of the differences is that with the 8 Pratimoksha precepts, your motivation is to be free of samsara. With the 8 Mahayana precepts, your motivation is to attain full awakening. Okay? And there's some minor differences in the precepts, but basically they're the same. Okay? And so the Sangha started in that way. And as far as the monastic Sangha, they were mostly wanderers, but then, like I was explaining the other day, during the rainy season, they had to stay put for those 3 months. And after that, people started staying put more and more, and there developed a cenobic community, a kind of stable community. And for the nuns, because there was some danger in just wandering, then they usually stayed together in communities. Even if one wandered, you usually wandered with another monastic or a group of monastics, because being around others who kept the same discipline kept you on your toes. And this is, what happens when you live in a monastic community, and you can really see the difference when you live alone versus when you live in a community. When you live alone, you can do what you want when you want it, and if you break your precepts, nobody else besides you knows it. And there's lots of ways to rationalize breaking the precepts, and so it's a very slippery slope down. If you stay together with in community, then everybody's doing the same thing at the same time. So it becomes much easier to keep your precepts. You're not fighting uphill. When you live alone, all your lay friends are doing going out to the movies, and they ask you to come with, and it's hard to say no. When you're with the Sangha, nobody's asking you to go out to the movies. People are saying it's time to come to the meditation hall, and so your meditation gets done, because you're together with a group, and so you don't have to think about things. There aren't so many external distractions pulling you away, and also there's just the support of the whole community doing the same thing at the same time. And if you aren't there with the community, people say, what happened? Are you sick? Are you, unhappy? Are you having a difficulty? We want you to come back together with us and practice together with us, because we're all trees growing straight up in the same direction, because we're all surrounding each other, helping each other grow that way. When we're alone, one little tree, the wind comes this way and something comes that way, and we get blown all around. Yeah, so it becomes very easy to practice, or much easier to practice in community. Sometimes you don't even realize how much easier it is to practice until you leave the community for a short time, and then you see, whoa, it's really difficult to be my precepts, And you may even have the experience, that you're here for 2.5 weeks, and it's easy to come and do your practice, and actually your mind is getting much quieter. You don't realize that your mind's getting much quieter. It still seems very noisy to you. But when you go out and you try and keep up the same discipline, and you're starting with the entertainment and the social life again, then you see, oh, actually my mind did get much quieter when I was at the Abbey, and it was easier to sit there. Okay, so it's just, the support of the community that is very, very helpful. When we're on our own, we have to be much stronger, and to learn to be strong, I think is very, very helpful, because it's either crash and burn or survive. There's kind of 2 options. So, I know that was part of my training. My teachers would send me off to places with no other Sangha community and give me a lot of responsibility, even when I was a young nun. And it was like, okay, either I step up to the plate and make my mind strong, or, I've had it. Yeah, and so, that kind of situation was good, although I wouldn't recommend it for everybody because it's actually quite difficult, when you're on your own as a monastic. So, so there's benefit in community for ourselves, but also there's benefit for society as a whole. The other day I was saying that in a way I think the monastic community is the conscience of society. When people come up here, if they see us living a simple life, then it makes them think, oh, maybe I don't need so much stuff. Yeah. If they come up here and the Sangha has a luxurious life, then they think, oh, the Sangha's really degenerate. But if we have a simple lifestyle, then it really makes people think, oh, I don't need to be the best consumer in town and have, so many pairs of shoes and so many different clothes and the most, the newest computer system and so on and so forth. I can be satisfied with what I have. And when people come and see people create, intent, actually the Tibetan term for Sangha is Ge Dun, and it means intent on virtue. Yeah, that's the translation of the Tibetan literal translation for this word meaning Sangha. Okay? And so they see people intent on virtue, and people in society in general find it quite inspiring, because all around them they have the 6 o'clock news, all around them they have the chaos in the family, and they have, the stress from their jobs, and they have people doing all sorts of unethical things, and they come up here and see people who are really intent on living an ethical life, and it gives them hope. People really have a sense of hope for the world and hope for society. So it's something that through our practicing ethical conduct, it's a way of positively affecting society and making people really think themselves about, well, what kind of human being do I want to be, and what kind of direction do I want to take in my life, and what kind of actions do I want to do and not do. Yeah? So it really causes people to think, but it also gives them a sense of hope. Now, here's a group of people who are consciously trying to generate love, compassion, equanimity, and joy. Here's a group of people who are consciously trying to have a simple lifestyle. Here's a group of people who are consciously trying to have kind speech towards each other. They're not always successful, but they're trying. Many people in the world aren't even trying. Yeah. Here's a group of people where, when I go to the Abbey, I feel welcomed, I feel belonged, I don't feel shunned, I don't feel, like I'm a pain in the neck intruding on people. I feel like people value me here. And that's an important feeling for lay people to have, for anybody to have in society, is that they feel valued and they feel respected and they feel welcomed. Yeah, so it's something that we can do here at the Abbey that really directly benefits society as a whole, as well as the individuals who come up here. Yeah, and I think also that people, well, we've heard from people that when sometimes they're just get done with the 6 o'clock news and they feel like, oh my goodness, and then they think of the Abbey and it gives them some hope and inspiration. So although we're not perfect, we're doing our best, and other people find that inspiring, and I think even we find it inspiring. Now, sometimes when you live here, with a group of people intent on virtue, it's very easy for the mind to get critical, because you're so used to being with people who are trying to practice, that then our critical mind just, instead of looking for the huge mistakes because we're not seeing them, now we're looking at the smaller mistakes. Oh, that person's so rude. That person's, always late. Oh, that person is, they have a loud voice. Oh, that person, is not very kind. And, it's very easy to start criticizing the Sangha and complaining about the Sangha and nitpicking at the Sangha and, oh, I saw somebody reading the news. That I remember I thought that, I walked into the kitchen at Kopan, and there was a monk reading Newsweek, and I was like shocked. Oh, how dare he read Newsweek? This is worldly things, and and here's somebody, kind of sleeping, and here's somebody, it's so easy to get very hypercritical of the Sangha, and I think that's just because we have a hypercritical mind, and in the absence of big faults to complain about, we nitpick. Yeah. Yeah, very common, isn't it? Yeah. So I think it's also very important to really look at the whole community and see, people are really trying and they're doing their best. And, nobody here is going out and killing human beings. And, everybody's advocating gun control. And, you look at the values that people here hold, and the people that really mean the best for society, and they're doing their own share in terms of their work. Yeah, in terms of stealing in the same way. We pay what we need to pay. We aren't concealing, taxes and, not paying fees and taxes and stuff like that we're supposed to pay. We're certainly not breaking into other people's homes, but we also are very attentive to what possessions belong to what people, and, what things are freely offered that we can use as a member of the group, and what we need to ask permission for. Yeah, and so, people are taking time and, to look at those things. Same thing, you come to a community where people are celibate. So that just cuts out so many trips. I mean, you know how it is. When people aren't celibate, then it's always, well, who's around there? Who's good looking? And are they looking at me? And how am I walking in the meditation hall? And, where are they doing their walking meditation so I can kind of do my walking meditation near them? And, are they looking at me and seeing how straight my back is and what a good meditator I am? And when the teacher cracks jokes, do we kind of look at each other and smile? And and you become very self-conscious. I mean, we all know how to flirt, don't we? We all know how to flirt. And so you come to a community of people who are celibate, and there's none of that going on. And sometimes people have commented to me that at first it's very shocking to them, and they even feel rather uncomfortable, and it makes them realize how much their whole way of relating to people was flirtatious, and how their whole way of relating to people was to draw attention to the self as somebody who's attractive, or somebody who's intelligent, or somebody who's this, that, or the other thing. And they come here and they can't hook other people in that kind of behavior, because we're unhookable. Yeah. And if we are hookable, because sometimes it has happened that people have come here with very flirtatious behavior, and somebody in the community gets hooked. The rest of the community notices, and we say something to that person, and then that person usually feels like, I thought I was being very discreet, and having my attachment and being a renunciate at the same time, but actually they saw through it. I didn't cover it up well enough. And then you feel kind of embarrassed, and then you go, well, actually, I did sign up to be a renunciate, so those people were actually very kind in commenting on that behavior to me, even though I was hoping they didn't notice it. Yeah. So and then we start looking at our mind and saying, oh, well, it's a whole process that you go through. And my mind wasn't actually doing what I wanted it to do. I was getting distracted. There was some good-looking person who was kind of smiling a lot at me, and I was smiling a lot at them, and my mind was going elsewhere. And I need to come back to what I know is the way I want to live and how I want to use my life. And, I don't want to spend my time flirting with people and attracting people to myself and doing all these little games that we all do and that we all know how to do. Yeah. 100 ways to flirt when you're in a celibate community. Yeah, because they exist. You don't have to. I mean, we take off our jewelry and everything like that, but then there's all sorts of other little ways that we do it. So, the Sangha community really keeps you kind of going straight in the direction that you want to go into. Yeah, and then you learn to deal with these things and confront these things in yourself, and to deal with people who are coming here with that kind of energy and who may or may not even realize they have that kind of energy. Yeah, because they're so used to acting in that way. And you learn how to deal with them and how to, and remain friendly, but stepping away and not hooking. People throw the hook, you don't bite it. Okay? So we learn that, and that's through the support of the community. When we don't have the support of the community, then, we can continue flirting, and the other person continue flirting, and then we all know what happens. Okay? Yeah, I've had my own little episodes with this. I've been ordained long enough to get attracted to people and then have people comment on it, Oh, I remember one time I was so embarrassed. Oh, I was so embarrassed. Because there was one monk, we were studying together with the same teacher, and we both loved the class, We were both loving the class, really into the material, asking a lot of questions, But then there was this eye exchange kind of going on across the room. And, but it was nothing, just, yeah. We would just, when Geshe-la cracked a joke, we would laugh and kind of look at each other. Or when he said a point that we didn't understand, we would look at each other. This is nothing, that's going on. And then one day, I remember talking to another monk and asking him about some people that I knew in another Dharma center. And he was telling me about, because they were old friends in a Dharma center, he had just been there. And he said, yeah, so-and-so is fine, so-and-so is fine, but they kind of have the same thing going as you and so-and-so. Oh my God. Because all we were doing was just eye contact. There was nothing else, but it's like, oh, he noticed. Ooh, that means everybody else in the class noticed. That means Geshe-la noticed. Ooh. I was so embarrassed. But it was a very good experience. Yeah, don't do that anymore. Okay, so how did I get off on telling that story? Yeah?
I'm really glad you shared that, because I haven't heard that story before. And also, I remember a couple of years ago, Venerable John Paul was telling me that he was speaking with visiting Geshes here about how to prepare for the inevitable, thing of lust coming up. And Venerable John Paul told me that he was so disappointed that he just got an intellectual, scholarly answer, and it just wasn't helpful at all. There was no conveyance of wisdom there. Just, we sort of brushed off. This is helpful.
Okay. Maybe I won't tell too many more stories. Because this kind of thing happens. Yeah? And you need the support of the Sangha to kind of, point things out to you. And sometimes people are very afraid of pointing things out, Or sometimes they point things out where there's nothing to point out, and then you get really angry at them. Yeah? But, yeah, anyway, it's helpful. Okay, so what I wanted to do, since it's almost time to stop, is talk a little bit about the way the Buddha wanted the Sangha to behave, and especially vis-a-vis lay people. Okay? And so there was a handout that you got, that I hope you had time to look over. But I thought that we would start looking at some of these things, and just trying to get a right conception of how the Buddha wanted it to go. Okay, so at Savati, in other words, Sravasti, yeah. Okay, so the Buddha is saying, bhikkhus, you should approach families like the moon, drawing back the body and mind, always acting like newcomers, without impudence towards families. Just as a man looking down an old well, a precipice, or a steep river bank would draw back the body and mind, so too, bhikkhus, should you approach families. Okay, so now it's like, well, what does this sound like, and what kind of feeling do we get from it? Okay, so, you're standing at a precipice or a steep river bank or looking down an old well. How do you draw back? You really draw back, don't you? Okay, so that may give us the feeling of, how to relate to lay people. We totally draw back and we become very aloof. Yeah? And it gives you that kind, does that wording give you that kind of image sometime? Yeah, it may or it may not, but for me it does. It's like, ooh, draw back and become aloof. And sometimes in the translations you'll find the word aloof being used, being aloof towards the world. And I think we have to understand what that aloofness is, because otherwise we could take it to mean that you withdraw and you become very cold. We usually associate aloof people with people who are guarded, who have a wall up, who are cold. Okay, so there's a delicate balance when you're a monastic, because it's for people who tend towards being aloof, this is the perfect rationale for not engaging with anybody. Yeah? You just back away and set up your wall, and it's it keeps you aloof. Yeah, and you're not really dealing with your interpersonal problems and your afflictions regarding that. On the other hand, if there's not the sense of withdrawing from lay people or from the world, then we just have our usual behavior, especially the people who are very extroverted and exuberant and like to talk to everybody, and then you're just completely involved in everybody's lives the same way you were before you ordained. Okay, so here we have two extremes. One extreme, I'm just, the reserved monastic, doing my holy thing. And sometimes you could even become rather arrogant. I've withdrawn from the world and these people are all very worldly and I'm doing my Dharma practice very purely. I'm better than they are. Or you have people who don't withdraw at all, and it's just like, oh, how are you? So good to see you. How's so-and-so and how's so-and-so? And, I heard so-and-so got married, and how are they doing? And this people had a new baby, and what does the baby look like? And oh, I heard so-and-so was having some marital problems. Have they gotten over it? And oh, and these people moved. How is their house? Is it really nice? And you get just completely involved in people's lives. Yeah. So those are two extremes, aren't they? Yeah. What we need as a Sangha is we listen to people, we relate to them, we're friendly, but we don't get hooked. And to me, the aloofness means we don't get hooked. We don't fall into our old patterns if you're an extrovert, But we are friendly. So if you're an introvert and you back away, you have to come forward and be friendly. Because if the Sangha is just like this, who's going to want to join the Sangha and who's going to see the Sangha as a role model? But if you're completely involved in people's life, then you're a busybody. Like you were before, with all these gooey, sticky emotional relationships and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, getting involved in everybody's problems and everybody's, dramas and so on. So it's a thing of being friendly, being kind, but having our own sense of self-restraint, our own sense of we're a monastic, and so we do this and we don't do that. Not a sense of, I'm terrified of my attachment, so get away from me. But, I've worked with my attachment. I know how prevalent my attachment is. I know where I need to cut things, and I cut things at that point, So, or I don't let things get to that point. Rather, that's better, I know, I can tell when things start getting sticky, and before things get to that point, I don't go there. So it's, I don't have to get to the sticky point and then pull back.
For me, this really relates to the question of idle chatter,
Mm-hmm.
which is always the part of right speech that I've been most confused about. And when I try to practice it just as like talking about the Dharma, conversations are boring, they don't go anywhere, there's no connection, usually.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm a little looser with it, something else happens, but I would be really curious to hear your take on right speech as regards to idle chatter.
Okay, so right speech as regards to idle chatter.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm talking as a nun. I'm not talking as a layperson. If I talk as a nun, I realize that with different people, according to their interests, their temperament, their level of involvement with the Dharma, and the kind of relationship I have with them, there may be times when I, just talk about the weather and something like this. Because it's very important to keep a friendly relationship with people. Like when people come in the door here, when Will came, his daughter had just gotten married. So it's like, how was the wedding, and was it nice, and this and that. And I was teasing him, I want to see a picture of you wearing a suit. Because I'm usually seeing Will in his work clothes. So I was teasing him about that. He sent a picture. It's like, there's Will in a tuxedo, my goodness. But, it was like, I felt that that's being friendly and kind, because this was a real big deal in his life, as, the first of his children getting married, But then I also knew where to stop. I didn't go further about, send me the whole photo album, and, when do you think they're going to have kids, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da, And then, being quite aware, I'm a nun, and here we're doing more Dharma discussion, okay? There's, when I go with my family is not at all interested in the Dharma, anything but, So I chit-chat with the family, When one person starts complaining about the other person, I usually don't comment. Or if I comment, I'll do it in an NVC kind of way, like, you sound really irritated because you need, do you feel like you need more understanding, or you need better communication? I'll just do that, reflecting to them what they're feeling. I do not take sides in any family kind of stuff, at all. And the same way even with, like what's going on with people, in Spokane, or people in Coeur d'Alene. I need to kind of know what's going on. Not everybody in the Abbey needs to go, no, but I think as abbess I need to have the big views, so I need to know what's going on with different people. So I listen for what people say, always being totally aware that it is their opinion processed through their afflicted mind. Okay? And if people come to me and start talking badly about this person or that person, again, I respond in a more NVC way. Okay? And I do not get involved in the conflicts between lay supporters. That is not my business. Yeah, I will talk to people. If one person's mad at another, I will talk to people about their own anger and give them Dharma remedies for their own anger. But I will not say, you should, you're right and they're wrong and you should go tell them this. Yeah? Okay? So, because that's deadly. As soon as, if you're a monastic and there's lay followers who have a conflict, if you take sides, that is not going to turn out well. It absolutely is not going to turn out well. Yeah, so you don't get involved in the conflict and you just talk to people about their own anger and give them remedies to their own anger. Yeah. But if you, yeah. So this takes really some restraint, because sometimes people want you to get involved and they want you to take sides. Yeah. And sometimes they don't like it when you won't. And sometimes from your side you really see this person has a much better reason than that person, and you want to take sides, but then you also know, but that person, the person you're siding with, is also very angry, and you don't want to side with somebody who's angry, who has uncontrolled speech, because that's not going to bring anything good. Okay? So you really have to watch your mind sometimes, and be able to hear things but step back, or just deal on the level of what is somebody's affliction and what help are you going to give them in terms of their affliction. Okay? And then, in the relationships, where you just have to, you meet people in a social engagement. You go to an interfaith gathering and you meet people. You're not going to have a deep Dharma discussion with them. Or you're on a planning committee for something, like we're involved with the youth emergency services in town, and that's where I was. Venerable Yeshe and I went on Monday night to a meeting, so we might chat with the people there. They're not Buddhist, we don't have some big philosophical discussion, but we talk about the young people, or just kind of how's your life, and they say, oh, you've been gone, and I tell them where I was, and yeah, so you keep a friendly relationship, but you don't get so involved that you spend a lot of time just chit-chatting. Yeah, I think this is actually much harder for lay people, because when you're a monastic, people realize they're also kind of watching you, and on one hand they want to hook you into their dramas and things. On the other hand, they kind of know that you have other things you need to do. Yeah. But it is, and they respect the robes, most of them. But when you're a layperson, it's much harder to kind of get out of the idle talk, I think. Yeah. And that's why I think when you get really into Dharma practice, that there's an automatic shift that happens where there's a change in friendship, And I know that really happened for me. I had, my whole circle of friends, but when I got into Dharma practice more seriously, then, the friends with whom I had, spiritual discussions remained friends, and a lot of people just faded away. In fact, most of them did. And I developed a whole new circle of friends within people who were studying the Dharma, because those were the people I could talk with, about the Dharma with. And I think one of the reasons we have the kind of discussions we have here is so that people get used to talking about the Dharma with their Dharma friends. Because I've noticed that we actually need to learn how to do this. Otherwise, you do go to some communities and some Dharma centers where people come, and I hear this often, they come for the teachings, they come for meditation, but afterwards nobody really talks to each other about the Dharma. They all chit-chat. Yeah? And they don't know how to talk to each other about the Dharma, because as you've noticed, it involves opening yourself up, developing trust in other people, really listening. And so one of the purposes of our Dharma discussions that we have, is to develop that ability to talk like that with our Dharma friends. Okay. So we need to pause now, but maybe that gives you something to think about.